The midsection of the 20th century had already seen many revisions to the American standard of values, with scientific endeavors about to prosper and church-going percentages on a downward spiral. Surrounded by germinating civil rights movements, young members of our nation developed an entirely new perspective on authority. One that marked the death of a blind loyalty to what many knew as a mere bloody quagmire, the severing of each young man's shackling draft notices, and the embryo of a new plateau of thinking across the Western Hemisphere. A massive gathering at Berkeley looked directly in the face of the administration's ban on political debate, and upon a wildfire of campus protests all the way to the Ivy League, the single most outstanding symbol of authority would be addressed. By 1965, draft cards were publicly burned in mobs all over the urban U.S. From this point on, American youth would breed an indestructible army of their own. What began as a mere obstruction of warfare would swell into a nuclear holocaust of cultural polarization, waging wars on blasphemous new ideals regarding drugs, sex, art, and gay rights, to list a few. This dizzy torrent of rebellious ideology could be classified entirely by the vast motto, "If it feels good, do it." The motto also justified a trend of communal living, which often took place outdoors, its purpose to establish individual communities totally self-sufficient and independent from outer society. Communes were also the product of a popular denouncement of all organized business and establishment, another notion in response to the travesties of the war. These bohemian herds gladly fulfilled the stereotype of the term hippie. Further promoting the hippie motto was a series of blissfully reckless rejections of social norms. Polyamory, open practice of multiple sexual partners, became a hippie staple. The cutting-edge birth control pill was heavily condoned, and even same-sex activity made frequent appearances. Quite a statement in a nation that would hold homosexual acts punishable by law until 2003. But by 1969, 200 confident LGBT fighters marched the streets of San Francisco in the first gay pride parade. However, the absolute pivot of controversy in the entire counterculture movement would have everything to do with its advocacy of narcotics. Not only are the hippies of the 60s held fully responsible for marijuana's widespread assimilation throughout the US one can observe the results of today, but a jungle of exotic hallucinogens would also make their debut, the protagonist being the psychedelic LSD. Swiss chemist Albert Hofmann, original synthesizer of LSD, described his experience with this incidental psychoactive effect in 1943. In a dreamlike state, with eyes closed, I perceived an uninterrupted stream of fantastic pictures, extraordinary shapes, with an intense kaleidoscope play of colors, said Hofmann. Despite Hofmann's grand account, new mind-altering substances of any sort remained a 20th century righteous man's nightmare, and many bad trips experienced would leave thousands of brains fried for life. However, the New Age still believed in a balanced diet of inspiration. And so began the psychedelic era, a radical renaissance of illustration, literature, fashion, and music, inspired by the day's finest supplements. Excessive vibrancy and experimentation was key. Rock and roll music flourished with a novel spectrum of instrumentation, production, and emotional design altogether. Precedents set in entertainment would reshape the culture of the world forever. In 1968, UK rock prophets known as the Beatles released the White Album's Helter Skelter, which resonates today not only as the heaviest Beatles number ever, but one of the heaviest musical compositions to date, based on its ominously uncharacteristic nature. This single would perfectly exemplify both the peak and the downfall of the entire counterculture movement. Within the year, ex-convict and aspiring musician Charles Manson heard Helter Skelter and misinterpreted its lyrics as the warning call of an impending violent uprising of Black America. This spurred Manson and his pupils' infamous murder cases in Southern California. At the scene of the murder case of a random married couple, Manson's final strike, Helter Skelter was found in blood on the refrigerator door. This tragedy, among other accounts of counterculture-induced violence, along with fatal overdoses of celebrities like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison, would mean the plunge of what felt so righteous. But of all the Vietnam War's outcomes, This movement shook stubborn America into due submission. After the fact of the Vietnam counterculture movement, men could choose their hairstyles. All existing mediums of creativity saw a quantum leap in potential quality. Countless second-class groups had their voices heard, once and for all.